I'm curious if you could just briefly kind of outline. So it seems like there were 2 points that really got the issue onto the legislative agenda. First being this kind of multi-sectoral dialogue that you held with other sectors in Kenya, where it was sort of well, you came to the realization, or it was spoken amongst these sectors that the sextortion is happening in many different areas, in many different sectors across the country. So it seems like this was a kind of important point in the journey. And the second being that you managed to somehow get policymakers in the room. So could you just speak a little bit about this sort of the steps that led to this bill now being introduced in Kenya's parliament? Like, what did it take from the research to that moment that's just happened a couple of months ago?
Yeah, so the first phase, as we indicated earlier, was supported by the Danish People's Aid, which helped us, document the issues, but also provide direct support to the victims of sextortion through the psychosocial support. But also through that process, we also managed to get into other processes like hearing the unheard, which was part of a global conversation that brought these vulnerable voices on the table. So that helped build the momentum on one part. Locally, we also engaged under the support of the Hewlett Foundation and we call them PASGA, our partner here in Kenya. We had another project which was referred to as the Water Governance House, which was a policy dialogue kind of conversation, and we narrowed down to the issue of sextortion as an issue. Again, now enabling us to do now the second level baseline information, which was now much more scientific, much more feeding into an academic and legal process. So this then enabled us now as a logical step to now have the public policy hearings, the public policy dialogues, which were now multi-sectoral, and really bring the issue of the sextortion on board. And now this then triggered now the conversation, as I mentioned. We now asked, now that these issues have come up, one from the baseline study itself, two from the multi-stakeholder conversations and validation of this report, what is the next logical level for this? And at this point, we are already engaging the local legislature, which is the member of County Assembly of Nairobi, already is trying to see, is this a Nairobi issue or is it a national issue? But also because of the gender perspectives around this, it was then prudent to engage the Honorable Esther Passaris, who is the women representatives for the county of Nairobi. Now, at her level, she also felt and advised on this, that this maybe was a little bit bigger than Nairobi. So even though there was this context of the catchment of the data collection and the stakeholders who have been involved largely being drawn from Nairobi, it was much more of a national issue. And Honorable Passaris really helped us step it up a gear, really give it momentum. She was really instrumental in mobilizing the members of the National Assembly, members of the Senate, to come and then gather to discuss that. And I think behind the scenes, the Honorable Passaris also took personal initiative to actually brief and engage these legislators so that by the time they were coming for the meeting, I think more than 3/4 of them were already more than half convinced of the facts and the purpose. So that when we now finally got this, it was almost like preaching to the choir, because they already had information. They had a few questions here and there regarding contextual issues, implication, what exactly we were asking. But this then, now in this second level, and I think, Sarin, this also came from the advisory from Honorable Passaris, that also get legal opinion, also get to engage people who are involved in legal drafting, because they are the ones who eventually advise the National Assembly, they advise the Senate. So this was also very useful for us in putting it on the right track of how one thing leads to the other, and who to involve, who needed to be around the table.
Yeah. And in fact, if I may add, is that if we did not have the commissioner himself from the Kenya Law Reform Commission at that meeting, we would have not come out with the amendment or the petition, because it was clear that he was the main feature of that meeting, because they were all looking towards him to give the go-ahead on whether this is doable or not. Is there need for it or not? It pretty much rested on the word of Josh Dache. But I think we also have to, I'd like to mention the support that came from outside the sector, which was Avaz, an organization that doesn't, they're more of a rights type of organization that had taken an interest in the issue, that had used their platform to reach their 70 million members, got over, I think, 700,000 signatures, and they're the ones that ultimately supported financially the drafting of this legislation. And this is where we had said, yes, because even with Malesi, when we were looking at the pool of people that needed to come, and we were not going to populate the room with our usual, no, that was not who was required there. It was the drafters that needed to be there, the Attorney General's office that needed to be there, the members of Parliament, but more importantly, the Kenya Law Reform Commission itself needed to be in that room. And I think this is a lesson in terms of the policies and some of these lessons that have come out. We are constantly drafting policies amongst ourselves. If you are not having, and I will say it, a lawyer drafting that policy from the government in their language, it's just a piece of paper or a suggestion. Because whatever policy work we had done was sent to him, including the report, for him to now come up with the official legal position, which was also the policy paper, because when everything was submitted to Parliament, that is the document that was needed. So, and I know, Rebecca, you really helped us by, doing the different cases from, from different sectors that also supported now the Law Reform Commission, the AG's office, to actually develop that legal opinion, which was then attached to the petitions and for them to go. But I think the best moment really, because Avaz was very helpful as well in the development of the legislation itself, was when the Deputy Speaker gave the marching orders, I think at around 11:30 in the morning. That's when she said, I want this thing on my desk Monday for reading, at least for first reading on Monday morning. So yes, we ended up working the whole weekend in terms of getting those petitions. I was interested because, to be honest, this is Malaysia and myself that wrote the petition. But in terms of the back and forth with the parliamentary office, no, you need to use this, you need to use this language, you need to refer to article of the Constitution, blah, da, 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 yada, yada, refer to, etc. You need to add the sectors, you know, in terms of now. And I think this was really good for us, because we did have a fear. Number one, we were not coming out with a law by Friday evening, isn't it? I think I had shared that with Malesi. And number two, that we're going to be told, go back and get more data from other sectors. But here, the fact that, like Malesi said, Honorable Pasaris had already prepared the members of parliament, help us mobilize them. In fact, I know some members in the room were pretty shocked that we managed to have about 5 to 6 high-level, you know, important members of parliament. It's very difficult to get even one in the room, let alone 6 of them, including the deputy speaker. So this was really in terms of, but also the maintenance and building, the continued building of relationship with some of these legislators. Even if we did not have the funding or the resources, we did make a point of making sure that, you know, we were maintaining the relationship at that point. Getting the commissioner himself, of course, required tapping into our own personal networks to try and get him on board, which means somebody equally just as important to convince him to come to the meeting. So there's a lot of this is behind the scenes kind of work, and once you get them, you know, to give them, okay, make the proposal in terms of who are the drafters that need to come in. So I'm still amazed that not that we actually didn't need, that's unfair to say, but at that point, it was not about the water sector practitioners being in the room anymore. It just wasn't.
Yeah.
It just was.
Well, yeah, I mean, it became in the best way possible, bigger than just the water sector, you know?
Yeah,
exactly.
And Rebecca, if I may just say, I think just to underscore what Sarin has mentioned, because many, I mean, as an advice to others who might want to do this, that at that ultimate point, we just need to get out of our comfort zone. It cannot be the usual lawyers, because they will speak the language that we are used to. For this, it has to go outside. I mean, if the usual lawyers are the ones who have that capacity to draft and to present it in parliament, then so be it. But it's more commonplace that we would have this sector-specific legal team that would speak our language, that would, you know, keep it within the cage. This is about thinking outside the box. It's about, you know, walking out in the uncomfortable space. And this is exactly what needed to be done when we're now thinking who needs to be part of this team that comes for this final retreat. It had to be thinking about who will make this thing go to the next level. So that would be our advice, that they must think outside the box.
Yeah, absolutely.